Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. Created by speakers for speakers. It's your fast track to sharper skills, bigger impact, and a smarter speaking business. Subscribe and download using the link below. And step into the spotlight.
This is another episode of Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. This show is the podcast for people who want to build a better business and be a better speaker. And the goal of this show is to bring you fresh and diverse perspectives every single week. My name is Thom Singer, and I get to be one of the 4 rotating hosts that we have every single month. And I get so lucky because each time I'm on the show, I get to talk to the most interesting people. I'm sure the other hosts feel the same way I do. But this week, I am joined by Mike Staver. Mike, welcome to Speakernomics.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of this podcast, and all of you hosts do a great job. So
thank you. Well, I'm a big fan of yours. For those of you who don't know Mike Staver, and I don't know how you could be around NSA or the speaking world and not know Mike Staver, but Mike is the former board chair. And in fact, because of the way it all worked out, going from 1-year terms to 2-year terms, he actually was board chair for what seemed like 900 years. It was actually 2.5 years, but he also stewarded NSA through some changes and some new efforts. So he was one of the people in my 18 years, 17, 18 years, who really has had a major impact on NSA. And what he does on the non-volunteer side of his life is he works with C-level leaders to identify the innovation and execution gap and then narrow that gap so that they can make better margins. And all of us need to be paying attention to that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I asked him why for so many years has he volunteered and come back on the board as the board appointee for the board chair? Why has he given so much? And he says, look, not every industry has people who show up to help their competitors. But NSA, people from significant backgrounds and significant business models show up and just help each other. And you just don't see that everywhere in the business world. And I concur. So Mike, we're glad we have you. So today we're going to talk about this whole idea of intention and execution and how do we narrow the gap? So what are 2 tips you have for speakers in this area?
Yeah. The first one is you got to be clear about your intention and narrow that down. And then the second thing you have to understand is bridging the gap is futile. You need to be incrementally committed to narrowing it slightly, consistently.
Nice. Well, we'll get into that and we'll break it down. But I think so many people want to make changes all at once, right? So
yeah, what they want to do is they want to, eat the whole elephant. And we talk about big, hairy, audacious goals. Frankly, Thom, I don't want to be around anything big and hairy. So and audacious, it's one of my core values. So I guess audacity is a good one. But yeah, I think we set these monster goals. I want to do this many gigs. I want to make this much money. And I'm saying, well, what is your intent? What is the outcome or execution you want? Let's just narrow it a little bit. And nice. That's how momentum's built.
Well, we'll get in and unpack that in a second, but let's start by saying that you work with C-level executives in some pretty big companies. Your business is mostly coaching and you speak. Now, it used to be the other way around. You were a speaker who did some coaching. How did that switch?
Yeah, I was at the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas for my second longest term client, a 20-year client. And I was walking down the hall at the Wynn, Thom, and they had those, I don't know if you remember, they had those infrared screeners that would take your temperature. It was March the 15th.
This is in the middle of COVID?
Check it out. The 15th of March, 2020, the day the world stopped. And I'm walking through the Wynn Hotel and it's empty, Thom, completely empty. It's me and the bellman and my wife. And I get to the car and I look at my wife and go, well, if this lasts a couple of weeks, we'll be fine. I lost 80% of all my speaking revenue in 72 hours for that year. And I called my team together. I have a small little team and they said, what are we going to do? And I said, what any great leader said, Thom. You know what I said? I have absolutely no idea. So I poured myself an adult beverage and went for a ride on my motorcycle, which is always really good judgment. And I came back and I said, all we're going to do is help people. That's what we're going to do. We're going to help the hurting became our mantra. And what I realized was that helping the hurting was such a critical thing to do in that time. And we started getting calls and people said, can you help me? And then can you help me? And then can you help my team? And it expanded. And then somebody called and said, can you teach us how to coach like you coach? And that's how it happened.
Nice. Well, I love that idea of we're just going to help people. I think that, in good times and in bad, if that's your motto, you're always going to land somewhere on the good side of that line, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think it's very challenging, I think, for us to bridge the gap, speaking of gaps, between altruism and making money. I'm sure some of our members and listeners do believe this, but I don't believe if you just put it out there, it'll come back to you. You got to add hustle, right? So you know how it is. You've done webinars. Our members have done webinars. Our listeners have done webinars. And you get about a 30% show rate. So I did one called What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do.
Nice.
And we had 1,800 people sign up for it. It's free. And the show rate is what, 30% maybe for a webinar? And we had 85% of the people show. So
wow.
What that said was people were hungry to know what to do when you didn't know what to do. And I think that's really an important thing. It's just hustle, 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 especially when times are scarce.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I tell everybody all the time that, you got to keep learning. You got to have goals. You got to have a good network. You got to hustle, and you got to have a little bit of luck and being in the right place at the right time if things are going to play out for you. Yeah,
exactly
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So you made this switch over to more coaching then during the pandemic. What does your business look like today?
It's about 80% coach, maybe 70% coaching, and maybe 15 from a revenue perspective, probably 15% or so speaking, and then the rest of it is teaching people how to coach.
Nice.
Which I'd never done in my life, Tom. And when I got a call from a company said, can you teach our managers who are coached by you outperform our managers that aren't by a multiple? Can you teach our people how to do I did what all great speakers and coaches do. I went,
of course I can.
Of course I can.
I have that program ready to go.
Yes. It's going to cost you, but I can do it. Yeah, that's right.
So that's great. So before we jump into your tips around this idea of narrowing the gap between your intention and your execution, what is some of the things you see coaching these big C-level executives? What are some of the common things you see where they make mistakes? And then let's translate that into the solopreneur or almost solopreneur business of speaking.
Yeah. That's a great question. What I've learned, Tom, especially over the last 7 or 8 years, is the problems are exactly the same. They're just scaled. So I think what I see is people lack clarity. They lack a sense of understanding how to leverage resources. They don't really understand that doing the things necessary to be successful consistently really matters. So if you take a multi-billion-dollar development company that develops luxury hotels, which is a client of mine, and you take me and my little business, the problems I face every day are exactly the same as the founder of that multi-billion-dollar company. They're just scaled differently and they manifest differently.
So let's look at speakers then. What are some of those problems? How are they affecting the people in the speaking world on a day-to-day basis? And then let's unpack all your tips.
There's a couple of things. I think speakers by and large, and I've made the majority of my income through the years until the last 5 or 6 from speaking, is they get too program centric, too speech centric, too topic centric, and they don't get enough business centricity. So what I mean by that is I believe the reason to build a better business, be a better speaker mantra is so important is we've got to treat it like a business. And I think there are those people who get into this business. I coach one right now, as a matter of fact, an agent who heard me at a real estate agent who heard me at a chapter meeting and said, I want to be a speaker. Will you take me on? I said, I don't do that. There are a lot of people in our organization, a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot. In fact, a significant number who will take your money and teach you how to do that. And they'll do a good job of it. But she said, no, I really want to work with you. So I took her on, and she was spending all this energy developing a topic and fleshing it out. I said, if you don't get a stage, your topic doesn't matter. This isn't what was that baseball movie? If you build it,
they will come.
Yeah. There's not a stage that's going to land in your living room and say, here, I'm ready for you. And it's very we live in an overcrowded marketplace where it's hard to be a colorful dot in a black and white landscape. And so, what is that old story? Somewhere in Africa, every morning a gazelle wakes up and knows it has to outrun the fastest lion, and some lion wakes up knowing it has to outrun the fastest gazelle. Either way, in the morning, you better be running. So that's the way I feel. Right.
Nice. Well, it is true that, sometimes as speakers, we fall in love with our content, right? We fall in love with our topic, and the landscape changes.
Yeah.
And, all this, whereas if we fall in love with the business we're building, then we can make tweaks. You don't have to throw your topic out. I never admire the people who suddenly become AI speakers when they've never turned on a computer because it's the hot topic. But, you can tweak your topic
Yeah.
to match what the trends are and sort of align them if you're thinking like a business person. But if you're in love with your opening and closing story, it's probably not the same thing, right?
That's not the same thing. And you've got to obviously have a content that lands well with your audience, but you've got to figure out how to get the gig. I mean, if you're not waking up in the morning running and hustling, it's very difficult to have any topic. And so, people say, well, how did you build a business and how are you as successful as you are? And there's many people much more successful than me. And honestly, does my topic land? Yeah. Is it funny sometimes? Yeah. Do I do okay? Yeah. But the reason is I got busy building a business and doing the fundamentals necessary to scale. And, it's a constant, to your point, a constant effort of tweaking and adjusting and hustling and pulling back. And I'll tell you this, Tom, and this is so important, and that is you got to be willing to trash the stuff that you're in love with if it just doesn't work.
There's a lot of people in our association and outside the association in the industry who just heard that, who pulled over their car and started to weep. Say that again.
Yes. Right.
Say that again so they can hear that.
Yeah, you got to be willing to trash your stuff sometimes. Who was that gave that speech years ago? Go to
Oh,
your
it was the
garage.
guy from Denver.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh,
God.
doggone.
But
Yeah.
but he I what he said, and we'll think of his name later, is every year he throws out all his slides and he makes
Yeah.
every slide earn its way back into the keynote. And I do that every couple of years because
That's
of that
so
speech.
brilliant, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
think
a great
about that.
reminder too. Even your friends can't remember who you are when you say
Yeah,
something
that's right.
great 10
Yeah.
years later.
God, I'm sure there are listeners right now going, "Are you too dumb?" Everybody knows it was.
He's buff guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know who he is.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway,
Yeah. So I think, are you hustling? Are you running? Are you doing the things that have a reasonable probability of getting you a result? And if you're not doing those things, you're not going to get the result. I don't care how well intentioned you are. I don't care how pretty your slides are. I don't care how many programs or things you do. If you're not doing the things that are the things that are going to get you to the outcome you want, it's futile. You might as well just eat some tea.
so that's actually a perfect segue into your first tip, which was be clear about your intention. So let's talk about how do speakers get clear on what their intentions are around building their business.
It's interesting. Gallup did a study and asked leaders, and I'm going to get the stat wrong, but it's over 60% of leaders show up to work every day saying I'm crystal clear, and well over that number of employees show up to work every day saying my boss has no clarity whatsoever. So I think most of us, the first thing is look in the mirror and say, as clear as I think I am, I'm probably not. So number one, admit that. Number two, look at what your ideal audience is and the defensible point of view that you have, and then courageously build something around what you want to build. If you want to be $1 million business, be $1 million business. If you want to be $100,000 business, there's no shame in it. Just put a flag on the hill and say that's the flag, and then wake up every morning with the focus on that. And then I think starting to look at, I'm a very simple, I'm not very bright, as you know, and most of your listeners know. So I just use a very simple process. What's the outcome I want, the strategy I'm going to use, the activities I'm going to do. Now, here's the thing. Most people in my practice and in my audiences start at the activity stage. They build the speech, they do the things, they make they just do all the activities. And whenever I say, so that what? Like, And then I just I put an equal sign in the middle of the page, Tom, and I say, these are all the things you're doing left of the equal sign. That equals what? More gigs. Okay, then if more gigs is right of the equal sign, then let's evaluate everything left of the equal sign and see if there is any possibility that the things left of the equal sign are going to equal more gigs. That's clarity.
So, and it's interesting. I love that. Is the activity I'm doing getting me to more gigs? And I think most of us probably would be, up front, we'd go, yes. And then when we really trace back where our gigs come from, that's not where the gigs are coming from. And I mean, I've found myself in that trap many, many a times. But before that, you said something very interesting. And that was, you said courageously, build towards what you're doing. And you said something very interesting in there, that if you want to build $1 million business, courageously go for that. I had to a long time ago in this organization say, you know what? I've got a nice little lifestyle business and I'm happy with that. And,
Perfect.
There were a lot of people who were like, oh no, you should have employees and you should have this and you should have 3 VAs. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to manage people.
No.
I'm not super money motivated. If I can have a lifestyle business that allows me to live with my family. And once I started taking pride on the fact that I didn't have to be chasing being a Hall of Fame speaker or, having, whatever fancy things, I just got happier in the business. And that's part of the turnaround that I've had since COVID is I know what I'm trying to build. And it's just a great lifestyle where I can live this out. And I'm courageous about it.
And you're intentional and you're not pursuing something for the sake of pursuing it. I think if most of us, when we were 21, 22 years old, somebody would have come to us and said, hey, by the time and everybody listening, fill in the blank, what your age is right now, you would be making this much money. Most of us would be like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But then we get there and we're like, oh man, 25 grand more, 50 grand more, increase my speaker fee by another $5,000. And what I love about what you said, and I really want those of you listening to hear what Thom said because it was really good. That's what I mean by intention. I mean, being being enthusiastic about the decision you make about the business you want to build. Building a better business, we didn't say build a bigger business. We said build a better business. So if you want to build a $100,000 a year lifestyle business where you're a solopreneur, then lean into that, but make it better. Make it better for you, make it better for your audience, and get better at being a speaker. That's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. So your second tip was you can't do it all at once, or you said it much more eloquently than that. So let's go into that second tip.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people listening and a lot of people in our industry and a lot of people out there doing training that say set big goals and do huge things and shoot for the stars and at least you'll hit the moon. Well, there's no oxygen. You're going to suffocate no matter what you shoot for out there. So here's my belief. Let's just say you want to build a $500,000 business. And so you put that intention out there in the universe. You are not going to go from wherever you are to $500,000 overnight. So that's obvious. Everybody knows that. But the law of incrementalism simply says that incremental movement creates big outcomes. So if you and I are rather landlocked, but if we went to the coast with your family in mind and we got in a boat on the West Coast and we just headed toward Hawaii and we got 1 degree off in the navigation, we'd miss Hawaii by hundreds of miles. And yet when we talk about incremental adjustments in our business or in our health or in our relationships, they don't feel glorious. They don't feel big. They don't feel like something we could celebrate. And I believe, and I teach and I coach people, let's just make the incremental adjustment, hold it, hold it, hold it. It isn't just making the incremental adjustment, it's sustaining it over time. And then another increment, and then another increment, because it also gives you the opportunity to adjust that course as you go, rather than getting your heart set on something way downstream. And then you end up going, I didn't want that. I was pursuing that all along. And then we got to build some big story for why we did it. And, it doesn't make any sense.
But, you said earlier that, you want to build a $500,000 or $1 million business. And, everybody knows that's not going to happen overnight. I don't actually think that everybody knows it's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of people who spend a lot of money thinking they're going to be in the $1 Million Speakers Club by, 2027 when they're starting today. So why is it that people have come to this belief, in my opinion, that they can go from zero in this business to being a $25,000 a speech or $50,000 a speech speaker, making a $500,000 or $1 million a year when they don't have any experience in the business?
Because I think this business tends to attract chronically enthusiastic extroverts. And I know this: enthusiasm does not equal ability. And I say all the time, until you've laid awake at night going, I don't think it would be so bad if the electricity got turned off, until you realize that my doctor years ago, during COVID. So when I built this studio that I'm in now, I realized one day my neck was killing me, Thom. I mean, I was like, oh, and I thought I did something wrong. And so I did a telehealth call with my doctor, one of my doctors at the Mayo Clinic. And he said, is how you're sitting right now, how you sit during coaching? And I said, yeah, it is. He said, notice that your neck is extended toward the camera. And he goes, that's what the problem is. And he said, but you don't look very healthy. And I had gone on that meat only diet. What's that called? The
Carnivore diet?
Yeah, but it's called something else. It'll come to me in a minute.
Paleo?
And he goes, you don't look very healthy. And I go, well, I'm trying to lose weight. And he said, what are you doing? And I told him whatever that diet was my brother was on. He said, stop it. It's not good for you. You don't want to do it. And then he said this, Thom, and I want you to hear this, and I want the listeners to hear this. He said, Mike, the only way is the hard way. And I'm like, brother, that will preach. And I say that every time I'm coaching somebody or talking to somebody on a path somewhere, and they bemoan the struggle, they bemoan the lift, they bemoan the sweat. I say, the only way is the hard way. It doesn't mean the hard way isn't fun. It doesn't mean the hard way is not fulfilling, but to expect that you can go from 0 to 60, unless you, as Sean said at Premiere one time, he said, you're not going to go from $1,000 a speech to $50,000 a speech unless you land a plane on the Hudson. Like, that's such a great line.
That we could just I think we could just end this interview right there on that. That's a great line. I've not heard that before.
That's the best. Yeah, that was the best line ever.
Or what did the Kentuckies say? Must be nice. Must be nice that tragedy happened to that. Must be nice.
Yes, they're right. Yeah.
So looking at this idea then of you can't close all the gaps at once, what are some advice for just the average speaker out there who you know of how we can incrementally follow this law of incrementalism? What are some little tips we can do?
Yeah. They're going to sound really obvious, so forgive me if they're too basic for the listeners, but I think the first is to get clear about what you're not. That's the first thing. Get clear about what you're not. Get clear about what you don't want to speak about. You know, I don't want to speak about time management. I don't want to talk about meeting management. My speech on meeting management would be really short. Don't have them, and if you do, make them short. Thanks for coming. I mean, that's it, right? So I'm not going to, so get clear about what you don't want to do and who you don't want to be first. You know, people say we need to focus, and what most people don't understand is that focus is about what you say no to, not what you say yes to. So get clear about your no's first. Number two, identify your ideal customer profile. And what I mean by that is who's the audience, really, really clear about it. And I don't mean, like, I do a lot of work in the residential real estate business, and that's a big audience, but I'm very clear about what my audience is inside of that. So get clear about that. And then third, get really good at one defensible point of view, one point of view that you have, and drive that point of view proudly. I think that's really important. So that's over here on the before you do it side. And then do something. We do something called the first 60 in our business, in my business. The first 60 is the first 60 minutes of every day is spent in revenue driving activity. And I don't do anything else after I do my quiet time first, my, meditation, quiet time, that kind of thing. And then the first 60 minutes of every single day of the week, I spend in revenue generating activity. It's not always the same activity.
So define what revenue generating activities are for Mike Staver.
For Mike Staver, this morning, I wrote 10 personal notes to people I haven't been in touch with who have used me before, and I have not talked to them in a couple of years, or worked with them. I've talked to them, wrote them a couple of personal notes. After that, I sent 3 or 4 texts to people that just came into mind. I do what's called contact roulette, where I just spin through my contacts and stop on just tap my phone and go, oh yeah, unless it's even if it's a relative, but usually it's in my business contacts. Oh my God, I haven't heard from them in a while. Text them, hey, shame on me, haven't been in touch, came across your name in my contacts, what's going on? And then I have a commitment that every month we send out try to do a proposal a week. Um, and we often send them to people who have not asked for them. And we don't price them. We send out, was thinking about you today. Here's a couple of ideas that I think would help bridge the gap between intention and execution. Would love to have a conversation with you. And this is what it would look like.
Nice. Nice. So as we kind of wrap this up, let's keep this focused on speakers here. What are a couple of other things that we haven't touched on? And I mean, you've been around NSA for 1 billion years, and you've been on the board for 1 million years. You were chairman for, what did I say, 700 years?
That's right.
You've seen a lot of people do this business well, and you've seen a lot of people come and go. What are a couple things, this can be anything. What are a couple things where you're like, I wish every speaker knew that, Becky did this and Brian did that. And if they all knew that, they'd be better.
The big thing I see is people quit too soon. They are one activity or one step from their goals and they get discouraged. That's the first thing. Resilience is a great skill, but it sucks when you're being resilient. It's not a great skill until you're done being resilient. And then you look back and go, wow, I was resilient. It's terrible when you're being resilient.
Right? I can relate to that.
Right. And then the second thing I think is not having people around you who will hold you up when you feel down or when you're ready to give up or when you're exhausted or when a client fires you and you thought you did a good job. This is a lonely business. And I don't say that in any way feeling sorry for us. We're blessed to influence people's lives. But if you don't have a support system or you don't have people around you, and then I think the third thing, and the thing that has made, if I've had any success as a speaker, it has been because I submit myself to rigorous evaluation. Every year, I send a video or an audio of a speech to somebody I respect and say, hey, could you listen to this? I had a speech coach and still do, maybe once a year. I'll hire a coach and just say, could you just listen to this video and let me know? And I think those are the big three I would suggest.
Yeah, no, I think all of those are good. It's hard to watch yourself on that video. I was just talking to somebody the other day who goes, I hate doing it, but I do it every time the client has an iMag and I get the copy, I'll sit down for an hour and watch the whole thing. And, I remember the first time I ever did it, I was screaming at the television, smile, my God, smile. And I have no problem with that on stage after that, because I learned that lesson. But of the three things you said, the second one resonates with me, because what I tell everybody is the secret sauce to this business is having speaker friends. Yes, and by friends, I mean, they're fun, they're good to be around, but they'll call you out or they'll hold you up when you need to be called out or held up. And I think that's why I tell everybody, if you're not involved in NSA, how are you ever going to have the speaker friends? Because it's such a lonely business that, you might run into one or two people here and there, but the great thing about being part of NSA is you get access to new people and old people and people who've been in the business 5 minutes and 50 years. And when you're not going to be friends with everybody, you're not going to have a love connection with everybody, but when you find those core people and you're adding to them as time goes on, you're going to stay relevant in the business because your speaker friends will help you see what's going on.
And you know what I think you're a great model of, and I want to acknowledge you for this, and you probably don't remember this, but right after COVID, you and I were having a conversation in the hall, and I think this is what speakers, you're a good model for this. And I said, Thom, how are you doing? And you said, I'm not doing well. And you shared with me a story about your business and some of your struggles. And it wasn't feel sorry for me. You had this very authentic sense of vulnerability. And we shared that moment in the hall, maybe it was 5 minutes together. And I so respected that, because there's so many peacocks in our business that want us, like, I have a client that says, God, Mike, I hope you never get a head injury in the part of your brain that keeps secrets and knows things about us, because all of us all of us struggle. All of us have moments of weakness. All of us have moments where we're like, this isn't what the brochure promised, or that kind of thing. And I think you're a great model of a person who is humble and authentic enough to say, well, that sucked and I didn't do very well, but I'm here for it. And you kept showing up and you kept volunteering and you kept being the guy you are. So I really respect that about you.
Well, this wasn't supposed to be about me, but thank you very much. I appreciate that. I went through some hard times, and I was not trying to get sympathy, but I figured
Nope.
if we all show up and say, "Oh, I pivoted, best year of my life," we're not helping ourselves or the rest of the industry.
No, you were great at that. You were great at that.
Mike Staver, thank you for being a guest here on Speakernomics. I am so lucky that when we spin the wheel of what guests each of us get as hosts on Speakernomics, that I got you as the guest I got to interview.
Man. And thanks for having me. I'm glad that the bar has been lowered so much that I finally got on Speakernomics. So that's
Have you never been on Speakernomics?
Never have. Yeah, that's my first time.
Well, I ran the show for the first 2 years. Shame on me for not putting the board chair on Speakernomics when I was there.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you to everybody who tunes in and listens to Speakernomics. You know what? We couldn't do this show without you. Subscribe, send it to all your speaker friends, whether they're in NSA or not, because we bring you this podcast, and NSA brings you so many other pieces of programming to help you build your community in this business, because that's the secret sauce to being able to be successful. So we'll see you back on Speakernomics next week with another guest who's going to make you think, make you learn, and make you be a better speaker and build a better business. Dun, 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 dun.
And connections, your NSA community is waiting for you. Join NSA today. Click the link below and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and download this podcast wherever you listen.